Hello AMP1. In this video I'm going to be going over the sheep brain lab, and I'll be going over the parts and that's listed upon this lab handout here. So I will be starting off with the brain model itself using several different brain models. I'll be using this one to start off with, and then later I'll refer to this one, and then after I'm done showing you all the parts with the models, I'll be bringing up a real brain, the sheep brain, and showing you the parts on that as well. Okay, so if you have the list handy, I'll just go right on down the list here and point out the different structures for you. The first three parts there, that's under meninges, the dura mater, and the arachnoid mater, and the pia mater, those are found in the real brain. None of these brain models have meninges on them, so we will get to that portion later with the real sheep brain. So I'm going to go down to part D list. And so starting off with the cerebrum. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain here. So you see on this model here, the cerebrum is this whole pinkish area right here. So this is the cerebrum. And so what divides one half of the cerebrum to another, if I put it together like this, you see your longitudinal fissure. So the longitudinal fissure goes all the way down the middle here, separating the left side and right side cerebrum. Okay, so here's the two halves separated by this longitudinal fissure. Each one of these halves is called a cerebral hemisphere. So here's one hemisphere, here's the other hemisphere. Okay, and then next you see the cerebrum is divided up into different types of lobes. That's where I like to use this type of model, because this model right here has the different lobes in color for you. And so the first of the lobes are the frontal lobe. So the frontal lobe is this tan color right here. It's in the front of the brain. So again, these are all on the cerebrum. So the frontal lobe is this tannish color. The parietal lobes is behind the frontal lobe. It's this green color right here. So everything in this green section right here is a parietal lobe. Next is the occipital lobe. Occipital lobe is blue, so it's in the back of the brain. Okay, back of the cerebrum right here. So this bluish color here is occipital. And everything in this yellow area is the temporal lobe. So to review it, you have frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. And it's the same on the other side, on the other hemisphere of the brain there. Okay, next would be the corpus callosum. And so when I show you the corpus callosum, I'm going to switch up models here. And so I'm going to bring up this model. So now you get into the internal part of the brain. So the corpus callosum is this region right here. It goes right across this whole area here. So this is the corpus callosum. What's important about the corpus callosum is that this is what attaches one hemisphere to the other hemisphere. So if I have the two halves here, the two hemispheres, you can see each one of these has the corpus callosum, and you put them together, okay, and it's a corpus callosum that links them together. They actually use a corpus callosum to help communicate between the different sides of the brain. The next is a transverse fissure. So to see the transverse fissure, I'm going to turn this brain around here, and then you're seeing the back of the cerebrum now. So the back of the cerebrum right here, this is the occipital lobe area here. Underneath the occipital lobe, you have the cerebellum. Now there's a division between the cerebrum and the cerebellum, and that is the transverse fissure. So here's the transverse fissure that goes right across here. So transverse fissure. What you see up here, this is the longitudinal fissure. This is transverse fissure. Alright, next two terms on there is a sulci and a gyri. Sulci, or sulcus for singular form there, that would be the small little indentations. So these little, when you're looking at the folds here, these little indentations is the sulci. These little elevated regions of the wrinkle are the gyri, or gyrus for single form. So gyrus are these elevated regions of the wrinkle, Sulci are these indented regions, these little creases, as you will, on there. So the sulci. The cerebellum is down here, okay, in the darker brown area, and there's two halves of the cerebellum as well. So here's one half, here's the other. So they have their own cerebellar hemispheres. Just like the cerebrum has its hemispheres, the cerebellum has its hemispheres. And when they come together, you notice that it has a little bit of a middle area right here. This middle area is called the vermis. So the two halves of the cerebellum come together at the vermis. Okay, next is a corporal quadrigemina. Corporal quadrigemina, when I open this up here, you see these two little areas right here. These two areas is called the corporal quadrigemina, which means four sets of twins, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So these are the together corporal quadrigemina. Now the top part, which is labeled as K right here, so the top part right here, this is the superior cliculi. The bottom part here that's labeled as I, that's the inferior cliculi. So you have a superior cliculi, inferior cliculi. Over in this side, superior cliculi, inferior cliculi. Together, there's 4 regions, corporal quadrigemina. The next thing is a pineal gland. Pineal gland is pink. So this is the pineal gland right here. Here's a pineal gland on this side. Okay, turning the page over. You got the olfactory bulbs. The olfactory bulbs. I'm going to put this brain together here. So once I put the brain together, these are the olfactory bulbs. And what's connected to the olfactory bulbs are the olfactory tracts, which is the long neck of the olfactory nerve. Next are the optic nerves. Optic nerves right here are below the olfactory. So you got olfactory as cranial nerve number 1. Optic nerve is cranial nerve number 2. And it's right below it. And there's 2 of them, one for each eye. This is exactly what goes into the back of the eye. It extends out and goes to the back of the eye. You have the optic chiasma. Optic chiasma is where the 2 parts of the optic nerve go across each other. So they go across each other right here. So this is the optic chiasma. Next, you have the mammary body. The mammary body is found right here. It's labeled as M on one side, and the other side is a little bit blurry here, but these are the mammary bodies right here. They're really close to the optic nerve because they actually help deal with visual reflexes. Next, you have the pituitary gland. Here's the pituitary gland right here that hangs off of a stalk called an infundibulum. And then going down the list even more here, you got the midbrain pons medulla. So that's going with the actual brainstem part. And so I'm going to focus on this part on the brainstem. And so you have the midbrain. The midbrain is right here. It's with the letter C. But if you look at the curvature of this, it almost looks like a shape of a banana. So you can see here's one edge of it, here's another edge, so it's curved like a banana. So that would be a midbrain. The pons is this oval-like structure, so it's oval like an egg. So actually like a banana and an egg right here. So the banana is a midbrain, the egg is the pons. Underneath the midbrain and the pons is a medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata is funnel shape. So you see it almost looks like a little mini tornado down here. So this is medulla oblongata. So again, with my little analogies, banana, midbrain, the egg is the pons, this little tornado is the medulla oblongata. And so all 3 of them make up the brainstem. Then down here it becomes a little bit narrow area. So this is where it narrows down and becomes a spinal cord right here, and that extends out to the all the way down your back. On the cranial nerve list, there's 5 of them that you can identify with this model here. Okay, and so I'll go through them real quick here. You got the olfactory nerves first. Next, you have the optic nerve. Okay, we talked about these already. Next on the list is an oculomotor. Now the oculomotor is a little bit difficult, so I'm going to orientate yourself here a little bit by moving one half here. So again, olfactory, optic. This is the mammary body. But after the mammary body, you see a nerve right here. This is the oculomotor. This is what moves the eyeball. Next is a trochlear. That looks like a kind of a noodle. It looks like a ramen noodle. Okay, so that's a trochlear. And then this one's a very large one, the trigemina. So those are 5. So I'm going to go through it one more time here. Olfactory, optic. This is the mammary body right there. This is the oculomotor right after mammary body. Trochlear, trigemina. Cranial nerve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I'm going to the last page here. Okay, and so you got the corpus callosum again, right up here. Corpus callosum. The septum pellucidum. The septum pellucidum is actually this wall right here. This wall. This is a wall. Think of it like a septum of your nose. That it actually divides 2 cavities within the brain called ventricles. So if I grab another model here. So if I grab like another brain model, let's see if I can kind of piece it together a little bit here for you. Alright, so if I grab this brain model here. You see, this one does not have a septum at all on it, and so it's an actual cavity. It's what we call a lateral ventricle. And when I open it up like this, you see that it's just a very large opening right here. That's a curved cavity called a lateral ventricle. So again, when you combine them like that, it's a big little open space like that, but here it has a wall that kind of blocking up that space, that lateral ventricle, and that's called again septum pellucidum there. So, and then you can actually look at this side here, and this is what the lateral ventricle looks like. It's a C-shaped curved cavity that cerebrospinal fluid flows through. Okay, next is fornix. So going back to here, again, you get the corpus callosum. You got the septum pellucidum. Think of it like a septum of your nose. It's a structure, wall structure. Down here, you got the fornix. So the fornix forms the base of this septum. So I think of it like the fornix like a floor. So corpus callosum is a ceiling. The fornix is a floor. Next, we got the thalamus. The thalamus is this oval shape right here that looks like an egg with a yolk. This is the adhesion part of the thalamus because there's 2 halves of the thalamus there that need to communicate with each other. So this is part of the thalamus, but it's not the whole thalamus because this whole oval is the thalamus right here. Underneath the thalamus is the hypothalamus, so that would be this region right here. That has letter G, so it's right under the thalamus. So all this right here is a hypothalamus. Now this whole area right here that you have the thalamus and the hypothalamus in, this is called the third ventricle. So if it's the third ventricle, where's the first 2 ventricles? The first 2 ventricles are the lateral ventricles that are found deep inside the cerebrum that I showed you on here. So 2 of these lateral ventricles, that's ventricle 1 and ventricle 2. So 2 lateral ventricles. Third ventricle houses the thalamus and the hypothalamus. Then you have this narrow area called a cerebral aqueduct. So the cerebral aqueduct goes from third ventricle down to our fourth ventricle, which is this triangular region right here. So third ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, fourth ventricle. Then after the fourth ventricle, it goes down to the central canal that actually extends out into the spinal cord. Okay, and then last thing, looking at the cerebellum here, you have this white matter here that's called arbor vitae. Now, arbor vitae means tree of life. So if you look at the white matter, it looks like a tree with tree branches. It's an arbor vitae. The brown is a gray matter. The brown is called a cerebellar cortex. Okay, so that is all the different parts of the brain on the model. So I'm going to bring up the real brain now. Take a look at different images of this real brain. I'm going to go back to the list here and show you the different parts of that with the actual brain now. Some things you can see really well on this sheep brain, some things you can't. If you can't see them that well on the sheep brain, I'm going to be more likely using a model to test you out in the parts here. Alright, so the meninges. We have not covered the meninges yet because they were not seen on a model, but now you can see them. You see this really tough tissue that's surrounding this brain here. That's the meninges right here. Now there's 3 of them. So I made a little cut right here so we can pull the meninges apart here. Now the outer meninge is called dura mater. So this is dura. Dura mater is on the outside. If I flip this over, the inner layer is arachnoid mater. So dura, arachnoid mater. Now there's actually 2 tissues here, so if I rub my thumb and finger on it, you can actually feel them rubbing up against each other, the 2 layers. So there is a little bit of a space in between them. So dura on the outside, arachnoid in the inside side there. Now the last one, the pia mater, is right on the surface of the brain, and it's really hard to take it off, but if you see a little bit of a shininess to the brain, that's the pia mater. That's right on the brain tissue itself there. So those are the 3 meninges: dura, arachnoid, and pia, right on there. Alright, next you get the cerebrum. Again, the cerebrum is the largest portion of the brain. So if I have this brain without a meninges on here, this whole portion right here is the cerebrum. Okay, same thing with lobes, but these are in color here. But if you go by orientation, this is a frontal lobe here. So the frontal lobe in the front, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital lobe in the back. So a little bit better with the colors in the model here. If I turn this over, got the corpus callosum. Okay, so that's how I'll use this one because I can separate a little bit better here. So the corpus callosum is the ceiling. Remember we talked about the ceiling, so the corpus callosum is the ceiling. You got your fissures that you can see really well. So you got the longitudinal fissure. And here's a transverse fissure. So longitudinal, transverse. Okay, sulci, again, are these little dark crevices. Gyri are the elevated regions. Cerebellum is in the back of the brain right here. Cerebellum compared to the cerebrum. This is cerebrum, this is cerebellum. The vermis, you see when you put these 2 cerebellar hemispheres together, it comes up as the vermis. So there's a vermis right there. Okay, corporal quadrigemina, I'm not going to test you on this. It's really small, the corporal quadrigemina and the superior and inferior colliculi, so I will not test you on that. That's why it's asterisk on the list. That means I will not ask you it on the actual brain. I will only ask you that on the brain model, which on the brain model itself right here, again, the corporal quadrigemina is right here with the superior colliculi and an inferior colliculi. So I'm not going to test you on this. Same as a pineal gland. You can't really see the pineal gland that well on here, but you can see it better on the model. So I'm only going to test you on the model right here. So it's the pineal gland right here. Alright, flipping the list over. I will get to the olfactory and optic nerves in a little bit here. Let's go over the brainstem parts. And so the brainstem parts are a little bit more difficult with an actual brain here, but we can still identify a little bit here, especially with this lump right here. This bulge right here, we can use that to orientate ourselves. This bulge right here is a pons. Okay, so here's a pons right here. Behind the pons that extends out right here is the midbrain. And then down here, imagine like a little tornado, this is the medulla oblongata. So midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata. And then down here is the spinal cord. Okay, now looking at the cranial nerves. The cranial nerves is really difficult to see on the brain outside of the first two. So on the actual brain, I'm only going to test you on the first two, the olfactory and the optic. So olfactory, this olfactory bulb is very large in the sheep brain. If you remember what it looked like on the brain model, this is kind of like a representation of the human olfactory bulb, and it's tiny. The sheep is pretty large. Okay, it's like the size of my half of my thumbnail here, so it's very large. Sheep has better sense of smell than we do, so they have a larger olfactory bulb. Next is the optic nerve. Here's the optic nerve right here that goes out to the eyeball. So those are the only two cranial nerves I'm going to test you on the actual brain, the olfactory and the optic. Alright, going to the last list. Corpus callosum, you can see that still. Remember, it's the top, the ceiling, or what I think of like the upper lip, the corpus callosum. You won't see the septum pellucidum at all. You see the lateral cavity, or the lateral ventricle. You see that really well, but you don't see the structure of the septum. Here's the fornix, the floor, or the bottom lip. So corpus callosum is the top lip. The fornix is the bottom lip, right here. You got the thalamus. The thalamus is right underneath, so it's that oval shape. So if you see like this oval shape that goes right underneath the fornix, okay, you orientate here. Here's the fornix right here. The thalamus is right here. So there's the thalamus. Underneath the thalamus is a hypothalamus. So here's the hypothalamus. The thalamus, the hypothalamus. Okay, notice this doesn't have a pituitary gland on the model here, but it has an infundibulum right here. Okay, then you have the third ventricle. The third ventricle is this whole area right here. So you got the lateral ventricle that you see right here. Here's a third ventricle, and then you see a fourth ventricle right here. Now what goes in between the third ventricle and the fourth ventricle that I'm running this thing around right here is a cerebral aqueduct. So cerebral aqueduct right there goes to the fourth ventricle. Central canal goes right down the spinal cord. And the last two things, looking at the cerebellum, the arbor vitae is the white branching, the white matter, the tree of life, and the brownish gray area in between those white branches is the cerebellar cortex. Okay, so there you go with the brain model and the actual real brain part. And so study this video again. Look over several pictures, diagrams that you can run across to help you orientate where these parts are. But do keep in mind, I will test you on both the model and actual sheep brains on the lab exam. So let me know if you have any questions. If we meet up in lecture, I can most certainly bring a brain model up during the lecture hall. Not so sure if I can do it with the real brain, but definitely I can have a brain model up there so I can show you the parts in person on that too. So just email me or post it in the forums if you have any questions. Good luck studying the brain, and good luck studying for the lab exam. Take care.